Why did they laugh right before the silence fell? The roar of 5 Harley-Davidson engines split the Texas afternoon like thunder breaking the spine of heaven. Chrome flashed beneath the wide sky, sunlight glinting off the spinning steel as Satan's wolves rumbled into the parking lot of Patriot Firearms. It wasn't just an entrance, it was an invasion. Dust swirled around their boots as they dismounted, 5 shadows against the heat shimmer. At their head, Razor moved with the kind of slow confidence born from never losing a fight. 6'4", built like he'd been carved from the side of a mountain, his leather vest hung heavy with old blood and newer arrogance. He ripped off his helmet, slammed it against the pavement, and bellowed. "Time to buy some new toys, boys." His voice carried violence in every syllable, a sound that made ordinary people turn away, close doors, and pray to be forgotten. Inside, the air was cooler, but not kinder. Elena Vasquez stood alone beside a wall of rifles, her small frame dwarfed by the steel and glass around her. 5'2", medical scrubs, pale blue, still smelling faintly of antiseptic and long nights under hospital lights. A pink purse hung from her shoulder like a peace flag no one cared to salute. Her white nursing shoes squeaked softly on the polished floor as she examined an AR-15, her fingers tracing the barrel with careful, deliberate precision. To anyone watching, she looked out of place. To Derek "Bull" Crawford, the store's 300-pound clerk with a polo shirt stretched past its limits, she looked laughable. "Hey, lady," he sneered, the words dripping with contempt. "You lost or something, nail salon across the street. This here's a man's place." The laughter that followed came like a chain reaction, quick, cruel, and ugly. A chorus of mockery echoing through the showroom, each laugh another small act of violence. Elena didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence said more than words ever could. Her fingers continued their slow inspection of the rifle, steady, precise. She checked the chamber with a motion too smooth for someone who didn't know what she was doing, tested the trigger pull, sighted down the barrel. Her eyes scanned the store the way a surgeon studies an X-ray, mapping weaknesses, measuring exits, assessing cover. Every step, every breath calibrated. But then the sound came. That low, vibrating thunder of approaching engines. The front doors exploded open. The wolves had arrived. Leather, metal, sweat, and arrogance filled the air. Boots hit the floor in synchronized rhythm, too perfect for mere coincidence. There was something military about it, an echo of discipline buried under years of corruption. The smell of oil and fear spread fast. Razor led them in, Snake just behind him, a wiry man with eyes like cold knives and scars crawling up his arms like memories that refused to heal. Diesel came next, a wall of muscle whose shadow swallowed half the room. The rest flanked them, spreading out like predators scenting prey. Bull's tone flipped faster than a switchblade. The mockery vanished, replaced by oily cheerfulness. "Welcome to Patriot Firearms, gentlemen," he gushed. "Best selection in the county. What kind of firepower y'all lookin' for today?" The sudden submission made Elena glance up. The hypocrisy was almost comical. Moments ago, Bull had mocked her for daring to hold a rifle. Now he was groveling before men who'd burned the world for fun. Her grip tightened slightly on the AR-15. The weapon was steady, her breathing steady, her pulse steady, but something deep within her shifted like a storm tightening its circle. Tommy, the 19-year-old stock clerk, watched from the corner near the ammunition shelves. He'd been sweeping, pretending not to hear the jokes at her expense. But now he couldn't look away. There was something about the way she stood, even surrounded by men who outweighed her by half a ton combined. It wasn't fear, it was control. She looked trained. Bull, sensing the need to reassert his dominance, sneered again. "Lady, this ain't Build-A-Bear workshop. Women don't need this kind of firepower. Maybe try the pepper spray aisle." Elena turned her gaze toward him, calm, almost detached. "I'd like to see your NATO spec inventory," she said softly. "Anything chambered in 7.62 with match-grade ammunition, preferably maintaining supersonic velocity past 800 meters." The room went silent. Snake barked out a laugh that sounded more like an animal than a man. "Listen to this chick, talking like she's some kind of sniper." Alina didn't look at him. She simply continued, her tone clinical, unflinching. "For long-range stability, you'll want a ballistic coefficient above 0.57. Grain weights between 168 and 175, depending on twist rate." That ended the laughter. The technical precision of her voice cut through the air sharper than any blade. Even Marcus, a weathered army vet browsing ammo in the next aisle, looked up sharply. He knew that language. He'd spoken it once himself, back when the stakes were measured in lives, not dollars. There was something in her posture. Something he recognized. Then Razor's shadow swallowed the light beside her. "Little girl," he growled, stepping in close enough that she could smell the sweat on his jacket. "You're starting to piss me off. Put the toy down before somebody gets hurt." His hand landed heavy on her shoulder. And the room changed. Tommy saw it, the subtle shift in her stance. Weight redistributed, shoulders squared, the faint flex of her jaw. A coiled spring, not a startled rabbit. Alina turned her head slowly. Her eyes met his, calm but unyielding. "I'm not looking for trouble," she said, "just making a purchase." Her tone was even, measured, professional. But her gaze flicked down to the Glock 19 holstered at his hip. "You might want to replace your firing pin. That model's known for light primer strikes after 10,000 rounds." The biker's brow furrowed. He hadn't told anyone about that problem. "How did she?" He stepped back before he could stop himself. And for the first time, uncertainty entered the wolves' formation. "Who the hell are you?" Razor muttered, his voice a blend of confusion and anger. Alina's sleeve shifted as she reached for another rifle. A faint pattern of scars flashed across her forearm, precise, geometric, too controlled to be accidents. They looked like someone had once mapped pain onto her skin and taught her to live with it. "Professional experience," she said quietly. Bull, oblivious to the warning signs, stomped forward again. "All right, sweetheart, enough of this act. This ain't YouTube. These are real guns." He grabbed an AK-47 from the rack, slammed a round into the chamber with theatrical bravado, and pointed it vaguely in her direction. "You still think you belong here?" Tommy froze. Marcus stopped breathing. Even the bikers shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't a game anymore. Alina didn't flinch. Her breathing slowed, 1, 2, 3. Her gaze softened, distant, as if she were somewhere else entirely. Marcus recognized that look immediately. He'd seen it in soldiers mid-firefight. That 1,000-yard stare that wasn't fear but focus. She wasn't panicking. She was calculating. 10 grand says she can't hit a moving target at 50 yards, Razor barked suddenly, trying to reclaim dominance. "Come on, Doc, prove you're the real deal, or walk." The bet hung in the air like smoke. Alina looked at him for a long moment, then turned toward the range. Her hospital shoes squeaked again, that same domestic sound, soft, almost gentle. But the silence that followed her was electric. She keyed in the settings, 50 yards, random movement pattern. The target whirred to life, sliding unpredictably across the track. Razor snorted, "This'll be good." But when he reached out to grab her hair, to pull her back, to reassert his world order, his fingers never found purchase. In less than half a second she moved. Her left hand locked his wrist. Her right hand stripped his Glock clean from its holster. The weapon came free, chambered, and leveled before most people in the room realized she'd moved at all. Snake lunged forward, blade flashing. Alina's elbow met his ribs with the precision of a metronome. He collapsed, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Diesel froze mid-step. Bull's grin vanished. Even Marcus felt a chill race up his spine. It wasn't violence they just witnessed, it was discipline. The kind that takes years of silent repetition, training so deep it becomes instinct. A surgeon's precision turned toward survival. Elena lowered the weapon and placed it calmly on the counter. Her expression hadn't changed. "Left hand only," she said quietly. "What?" Bull blinked. "I'll shoot with my non-dominant hand," she clarified. The words dropped like lead. Left-handed accuracy at 50 yards on a moving target, impossible for most shooters. But her tone wasn't boastful, it was matter-of-fact, like gravity or heartbeat or rain. Bull started laughing again. It was nervous this time. "Lady, this just keeps getting better." Elena didn't reply. She only adjusted her stance, feet shoulder-width, elbows relaxed, weapon aligned. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. He knew that stance. He'd seen it once, years ago, during a classified briefing. They'd called it the phantom grip, a technique rumored to belong to an elite operator unit that officially didn't exist. The shot cracked. The bullet cut through air like truth. Dead center. Then another. And another. 15 rounds, fired in rhythmic succession. Controlled, deliberate, impossible. Each one struck the target as if guided by invisible math. When the last casing clattered onto the floor, the paper silhouette stopped moving. A skull and crossbones stared back from 50 yards away. The silence that followed was almost holy. Tommy's phone shook in his hands as he filmed, the sound of his heartbeat loud in his ears. Marcus exhaled slowly, realization dawning. Razor stared at the target, his mouth working soundlessly. That ain't possible," Bull whispered. Elena lowered the rifle, set the safety, and began dismantling it with calm efficiency. Metal clicked against metal, precise, deliberate, almost ritualistic. She didn't look up, didn't gloat, didn't speak. In that silence, every man in the room saw himself reflected, and none of them liked what they saw. Who was she? What kind of nurse could do that? And why did the air suddenly feel heavy, as if something, or someone, was about to walk through that door and change everything? Because sometimes the quietest person in the room isn't the weakest. Sometimes she's just tired of proving what she already knows. What happens after silence? After everyone realizes they've just witnessed something impossible. The echo of Elena's last shot still hung in the air like ghost smoke. The smell of gunpowder and fear mingled together, sharp, metallic, unforgettable. No one moved. Not the bikers, not the clerk, not even Marcus, the veteran whose instincts screamed that he'd just seen something that shouldn't exist outside classified walls. Elena stood motionless, the rifle lowered but still alive in her hands, like it hadn't decided whether peace or war would come next. Her expression was unreadable, calm, focused, detached. Her eyes, though, there was something there. A distance, a weight carried too long. Tommy's phone trembled as it recorded the impossible scene. His young voice whispered almost reverently, She hit all of them with her left hand." Bull swallowed hard. The sound was loud in the silence. Razor just stared at the target. The perfect skull and crossbones punched through the moving silhouette 50 yards away. His swagger had bled out through his boots. The hand that had grabbed her shoulder now hung useless at his side, fingers twitching as if unsure they still belonged to him. "That's not," he began, but his voice cracked. "That's not human." Elena didn't answer. Instead, she set the rifle gently onto the counter and began disassembling it. Not one gun, but 5. An AR-15, a Glock 19, a Remington 870, an AK-47, a Barrett M82. Her hands moved in perfect synchrony, 5 weapons field stripped in under 40 seconds. Not rushed, Not showy, just methodical. By the time she was done, each part lay in perfect alignment, as if arranged for an inspection that hadn't yet been called. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, controlled. 47. The number dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. Ripples spread through every mind present, though no one understood what it meant. 47 what? Tommy asked quietly, his voice small. Elena looked up. 47 people I treated for gunshot wounds, she said. Her eyes didn't blink, and 47 I didn't. Something cold passed through the room. Even Marcus, who'd seen things most people couldn't imagine, felt the chill settle in his bones. She wasn't just a nurse. She wasn't even just a soldier. She was something else, something built for a world that existed in the shadows. Then came the sound. Boots on concrete. Measured, heavy, commanding. They all turned toward the entrance. The glass doors of Patriot Firearms swung open, and daylight poured across the floor like revelation. A man stepped inside, his dress blues catching the light. Rows of medals lined his chest, ribbons that whispered of campaigns most civilians had never heard of. His posture was a sculpture of discipline, straight back, eyes scanning, every movement deliberate. Commander James Harrison. Even before he spoke, everyone in the store felt it, that electric shift in the air when authority walks in. He stopped just inside the doorway, his boots planted square, his gaze sweeping the room. The silence deepened. The commander's eyes moved from the shattered bravado of the bikers to the pale-faced clerk, to Marcus standing at quiet attention, and then to her. Elena. His gaze froze. Recognition hit him like a punch to the gut. The rifle, the stance, the pattern on the target. Phantom grip, he whispered, barely audible. It can't be. Elena looked up from the counter, meeting his eyes across the room. And in that single glance, everything changed. For the first time since entering the store, she looked human. A flicker of something passed between them, regret maybe, or the ghost of memory. The commander took a slow step forward. Ghost 7, he breathed, the words carrying the weight of legend. Good God, they told us you were dead. Every head turned. The name hung in the air, heavy, foreign, unreal. Ghost 7. A designation, not a name. A myth whispered in the dark corners of military rumor. Razor frowned, confused. What the hell is a Ghost 7? No one answered him. Commander Harrison moved closer, his voice steady but thick with disbelief. Operation Nightfall. We saw the satellite images. We had confirmation. You were KIA. Elena's hands froze on the disassembled rifle. Her shoulders rose and fell once, then she looked up. Sometimes being dead, she said quietly, is the only way to stay alive. The commander stopped a few feet from her. It was the kind of moment that could split history, the living meeting the ghost they'd buried. Operation Nightshade, she added. He inhaled sharply, like she'd just spoken the name of a ghost. That word alone was classified beyond imagination, denied even by those who handled extraterrestrial black projects. He'd seen it only once, in a redacted briefing stamped level black. No records exist. The commander's voice lowered. You were Nightshade. She gave the smallest nod. He looked away, overcome. Years of discipline barely held his composure. You shouldn't even be here. Your name was erased from every record, every file. Elena's voice softened, but her words carried a lifetime of exhaustion. They wanted me gone, so I disappeared. The world needed a healer more than another ghost. Harrison straightened, the soldier in him snapping to full presence. Then, with the precision of a man who still understood ceremony even in chaos, he saluted. And the entire store seemed to stop breathing. Ghost 7 confirmed alive and operational, he said, his voice echoing through the stunned silence. All personnel, stand at attention. You are in the presence of a Medal of Honor recipient, classified Level Black operations. The bikers froze, Bull went pale. Even Tommy instinctively straightened, not knowing why. The words hit like thunder. Medal of Honor, Level Black. It wasn't just respect, it was revelation. Razor's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Snake, still clutching his ribs, muttered something under his breath that sounded like a prayer. Bull dropped to his knees, hands trembling. Commander Harrison's salute held for a full second before he lowered it, his gaze never leaving Alina's face. "You saved lives, Ghost," he said softly, "more than anyone will ever know." Alina exhaled, her breath catching slightly at the edges. The smallest tremor crossed her hand before she steadied it again. 47, she murmured. Confirmed eliminations. 6 operations. 0 civilian casualties. It wasn't pride, it wasn't guilt, it was truth. Unvarnished, unembellished truth. The commander nodded. He knew the weight behind every number she'd just spoken. Every operation name that would never see daylight: Nightshade, Silent Thunder, Ghost Walker, Blood Moon. The bikers looked like men witnessing a miracle they didn't understand. Marcus stepped forward slowly, the respect in his movement instinctive. "Ma'am, if it's really you, then I owe you. 43 men from my battalion came through your trauma unit in Kandahar. Every one of them lived." Her gaze softened for the first time. "Then we're both survivors, Sergeant." The words hung between them, a quiet understanding that transcended rank and time. Bull finally found his voice, but it came out a whisper. "I didn't know, oh God, I didn't know." Alina turned toward him. Her tone wasn't angry, just tired. "You didn't need to. People rarely see what's in front of them when they think they already know what they're looking at." He nodded shakily, tears threatening his eyes. "I'm sorry." Alina's expression didn't change. Ignorance isn't evil, but it can be dangerous. Learn from it. Then she turned back to the commander, who was still standing at attention, his hand twitching near his cap as if unsure whether to salute again or reach for the past he thought buried. "The world thinks you're gone," he said quietly, "but maybe it's time they knew." Alina shook her head. "The world doesn't need another soldier, it needs fewer ghosts." Her eyes drifted toward the target still hanging at the end of the range. A perfect skull. A symbol of everything she once was, and everything she was trying not to be anymore. Harrison followed her gaze. "That pattern, the skull and crossbones, we saw that in briefing footage once. You used it in Cherkov during the blackout." She smiled faintly, a small, tired curve of the lips. "Old habits die harder than soldiers." The commander almost smiled back. "And yet you walked away." "Not walked," she corrected softly. "Crawled, bled, hid, then healed." Outside, the Texas sky was darkening, clouds gathering as if mirroring the storm inside. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the commander took a slow step forward. "The Pentagon will want to debrief you. They'll want you back." Alina's response was immediate. "I'm not coming back." He studied her face, the calm defiance, the quiet strength. "Then what are you going to do?" Her gaze drifted toward the window, to the fading light beyond the glass. "Maybe," she said slowly, "I'll teach people how not to need soldiers like me." A long silence followed. Only the hum of the fluorescent lights filled it. Then the commander nodded once deeply. "You always were the best of us." Alina didn't answer. She simply began reassembling the rifles she had taken apart earlier, each piece sliding into place with precision and finality. By the time she finished, her face was calm again. Professional, almost peaceful. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. Inside, history exhaled. And for one strange, quiet moment, everyone in that store understood something they'd never forget. That sometimes the most dangerous warriors are the ones who don't look like warriors at all. That strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just stands there, silent, steady, unbreakable. Because dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It simply acts. What happens after the mask breaks, when the world sees who you really are? The store was still frozen in the quiet aftershock of revelation. Alina stood at the counter, motionless, surrounded by pieces of reassembled rifles that gleamed like memories laid bare. The bikers, men who had swaggered in like kings of asphalt, now stood silent, small. Tommy still held his phone, but his arms hung limp at his sides. Marcus, the veteran, hadn't moved an inch. His gaze stayed fixed on her like a man watching a ghost materialize from smoke. And Commander Harrison, he just stood there, his eyes heavy with recognition and regret. He had once signed off on operations like hers. He had read reports filled with numbers, confirmed kills, 0 civilian casualties, successful extraction. But the paperwork never mentioned what it cost to become someone capable of that perfection. Alina, he said softly. Not Ghost 7. Not the designation. Her name. It felt strange to her, hearing it again from someone who'd known the version that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Commander, she replied quietly, setting the last rifle piece in place. Her voice was steady, but something in her expression shifted, like a door closing behind her eyes. Let's talk outside, he said, too many ears here. She nodded once, slinging her medical bag over her shoulder, that pink purse still hanging like a fragment of camouflage from another life. As she walked past Bull, he lowered his gaze in shame. Razor stepped aside wordlessly, eyes wide, throat tight. Snake, still clutching his ribs, muttered something like a prayer. And Tommy just whispered, "Ma'am, that was unreal." Alina gave a faint, weary smile. Reality's overrated, kid. Then she stepped out into the open air. The sun had started to fall behind the ridge, turning the Texas sky a bruised orange. The parking lot shimmered with fatting heat. 5 motorcycles gleamed like wounded animals in the dying light. And near the far end of the lot, Commander Harrison stood beside a government vehicle, black, polished, official. He opened the door for her, a gesture that felt more like respect than protocol. Inside, the car smelled of old leather and quiet authority. No words passed between them for a long moment. The engine hummed softly, the world outside moving in slow motion, shadows lengthening across the asphalt, the last rays of sunlight catching on chrome and glass. Finally, Harrison spoke. "They told us you died in nightfall," he said. "I signed the condolence letter myself. You were gone." "I was," she answered. Her voice was calm, detached, almost too even. "For what they needed me to be, I had to be dead." "Jesus, Alina," his hand tightened on the steering wheel. "You could have reached out, we could have." "You couldn't," she interrupted softly. "You know how those compartments work. You weren't cleared to know who we were, only what we did." He looked at her for a long time, as if trying to see through the walls she'd built. "What did they do to you out there?" For the first time, her gaze broke. She looked down at her hands, the same steady hands that had just dismantled 5 rifles and a man's pride in one afternoon. "They trained us to become something we weren't born to be," she said slowly, "then punished us for becoming it too well." The commander's jaw tightened. He knew exactly what she meant. She went on, her tone turning inward, like she was narrating her own ghosts. "They broke us apart piece by piece, rewired fear into reflex, turned compassion into calibration. I could feel my heartbeat slow on command by the end of it. My hands stopped shaking years ago, but so did my emotions." Harrison's eyes flicked toward her, and then they sent me to fix what others broke. Her gaze hardened. Sometimes that meant people, sometimes it meant nations. A long silence filled the car. Outside, the evening wind rolled over the open highway like a slow exhale from the earth itself. "You were the best," he said finally. "You saved more lives than any operator I've ever read about." She smiled faintly, but there was no joy in it, and ended enough to balance the scale. He hesitated before speaking again. "You remember Nightshade?" Alina's expression didn't change, but something in her breathing did. "You know I do." "The files were sealed," he said. "Even I wasn't cleared to read them, but I heard whispers that it was bad, that you saw things." Alina's voice dropped to a whisper. "I did more than see." The words hung heavy in the air. Then softer, "There were civilians caught in the crossfire. We were ordered to pull back. I didn't." Harrison turned to her sharply. "But your report said 0 civilian casualties." "It was edited," she said flatly. "The truth doesn't fit well in classified briefings." He exhaled through his nose, the weight of her confession settling like lead between them. "Why tell me this now?" "Because I'm tired of carrying ghosts alone." Her eyes lifted to meet his. "You ever wake up hearing names you never said out loud, the people who never made it into your reports?" He swallowed hard, "Every damn night." Then, for the first time since entering the store, she looked vulnerable, her voice trembling just slightly. "I didn't come here to be remembered, Commander. I came here to disappear." "Then why the gun store?" he asked gently. She leaned back, exhaling. "Because healing people doesn't erase the part of you that still knows how to kill. It just gives it something else to do with its hands." The commander turned toward her fully. "You're not a killer anymore, Alina." She looked out the window, where the sky was bleeding from orange to violet. "Every time I close my eyes," she whispered, "I see their faces. That means I still am." Harrison sat in silence, hands resting on the wheel, letting her words breathe. Then he said quietly, "I didn't come here to recruit you, but if you ever decide to come back, the door will always be open." She laughed softly, a sound more like exhaustion than humor. "The door was never closed. I locked it myself." The commander studied her profile, small, calm, unassuming. The same woman who had taken down an entire outlaw gang without breaking stride. The same ghost who'd once vanished into the cracks of history. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "The missions, the life?" Her answer came after a long pause. "No, but I regret what it made of me." The sun dipped fully behind the ridge, and for a moment, darkness wrapped around them like a secret they both understood. He started the car but didn't drive, letting the engine idle as headlights began to bloom along the highway. "Alina," he said finally, "when I saw that target, the skull and crossbones, it was like seeing an old signature. You knew I'd recognize it." She nodded slightly. "Part of me hoped you would." "Why?" "So I wouldn't have to hide anymore." He looked away, blinking hard. "We hide to protect what's left of us, but sometimes hiding just keeps us broken." Her gaze softened. "That's why I left." "Because you were breaking." She turned her eyes to the horizon. "Because I already was." For a while neither spoke. The world outside the car had shifted into that in-between place. No longer day, not yet night. Just the quiet time when truth sounds louder because everything else has stopped. Finally, Harrison reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope, heavy with the weight of consequence. "The Pentagon will want to debrief you," he said. "They're activating Silent Thunder again. They want you back in the field." Alina's face didn't move, but her silence said everything. He placed the envelope on the dashboard between them. "They're offering full reinstatement, clearance reinstated, rank restored." She didn't look at it. "I'm not that person anymore," she said softly. "Then who are you?" She thought about it. The answer came slowly, like something rediscovered rather than invented. "I'm someone who still believes saving a life is worth more than taking one." Harrison nodded, but there was sorrow in the motion. "That's exactly why they want you back." The headlights from a passing truck swept across their faces, brief, blinding light cutting through the dark. When it passed, she looked different somehow, smaller, gentler but no less formidable. She picked up the envelope, studied it for a moment, then placed it gently back on the dashboard. "You can tell them I'm busy." "Doing what?" She turned to him with the faintest smile. "Healing." He looked at her for a long moment, then sighed, almost in surrender. "You always did find your own war." Elena smiled faintly. This one might finally be worth fighting. He started the car again, pulling slowly toward the exit. "What'll you do now?" "Teach," she said. "Maybe train women to defend themselves. Real training, not pink pistols and empty slogans. Something that saves lives before they need saving." The commander nodded approvingly. "You'd be damn good at it." "I know," she said softly, "because I've seen what happens when they're not." They reached the end of the lot. The last of the light was fading now, and the world seemed to exhale around them. Before she stepped out, Harrison spoke again, his voice lower this time. "Elena, one more thing." She paused, hand on the door. "Back there," he said, "when you took that shot, 15 rounds, left-handed, perfect pattern, you could have just proven them wrong with one bullet. Why draw the skull?" She looked over her shoulder, eyes shadowed but steady. "To remind myself," she said quietly, "that death is an art, it's mathematics, precise, predictable, cold. I made it ugly on purpose." The commander's throat tightened. "And now?" "Now," she said, stepping out into the night, "I make something beautiful instead." The door closed gently behind her. The commander sat there for a long while, staring through the windshield at the woman walking away under the fading sky, small, quiet, carrying her medical bag like a relic of both salvation and sin. And as the car engine idled, he whispered into the silence, "Welcome home, Ghost 7. But she didn't turn back. Because some ghosts don't return to haunt. They walk ahead, leading the living toward something better. How do you start over when your past refuses to let you go? Elena didn't drive home that night. She didn't even know where home was anymore. The highway stretched out before her, endless, empty, and honest, a thin black ribbon cutting through the bones of Texas. Her old SUV hummed beneath her like a heartbeat too tired to quit. Headlights swept across endless plains. Wind pressed against the windows like whispers of ghosts that still remembered her name. She'd driven away from firefights before, engines roaring, rotors thundering, radios screaming. But this was different. This was the kind of silence you can't escape. The kind that follows you, even when you leave the war behind. Her phone buzzed once. Unknown number. She didn't answer. A few minutes later, another buzz. Then another. The same number, persistent. Finally, she pulled over to the shoulder, the engine idling under a pink and gold sky that was trying too hard to look peaceful. She stared at the screen for a moment, then answered. "Elena Vasquez," she said flatly. A pause, then a voice she hadn't heard in years, slow, deliberate, gentle as gravel. "You still answer like a soldier." She froze. "Marcus." The veteran chuckled softly on the other end. "You don't forget that stance, Ghost. I recognized it long before the commander showed up. I just didn't believe it until he said your name." Her eyes softened. "You didn't say anything." "I figured you had your reasons for being invisible," he said. "But I wanted to say something before the world swallows that moment whole. What you did back there, it changed people." She looked out across the darkening plains, the horizon fading into bruised twilight. "I didn't mean to change anything." "Maybe not," Marcus said. "But you did. That kid Tommy's video already hit the internet. It's everywhere. They're calling you the ghost nurse." Elena closed her eyes. "God." "Don't worry," Marcus continued gently. "They don't know your real name. But the message got through, you know. Every woman who's ever been laughed at for walking into a gun store, or doubted in a uniform, or told she couldn't handle the weight of a weapon. They just watched you destroy that myth without saying a word. Her jaw tightened. I didn't do it for them. No, Marcus said, but they're still watching. The wind outside her car picked up, rustling dry grass and memory alike. You ever think about teaching again? Marcus asked after a moment. Not in hospitals, but in something bigger, tactical awareness, real-world training, passing on what you know before it disappears with you. She didn't answer right away. The idea lingered, dangerous and alive. Teaching means explaining, she said finally, and explaining means remembering. Maybe that's what you need, he said softly. Not to forget, but to give the pain somewhere else to live. The line went quiet. Then, with a voice that felt like an old friend handing her a loaded truth, he said, sometimes redemption isn't about what you erase, it's about what you build afterward. She didn't reply, but something in her chest, something that had been locked in steel and silence for years, shifted. She drove until midnight. Dallas lights appeared in the distance, a sprawling glow of civilization against the wilderness. It wasn't home, but it was familiar. Hospitals, night shifts, the smell of antiseptic and adrenaline. By the time she pulled into her apartment's small parking lot, her body was running on reflex, but her mind was a storm of noise. The pink purse hit the couch. The medical bag landed beside it. And for a long moment, she just stood there in the half-dark, hands still trembling from a fight that had ended hours ago, but hadn't really ended at all. Her reflection in the window looked back at her tired eyes, a faint scar under her left cheekbone, hair tied too tight. The face of a healer, the posture of a soldier. I chose to heal, she whispered to her reflection. But the echo that came back didn't sound convinced. Later that night, she sat at her kitchen table, the overhead light flickering like an interrogation lamp. The envelope from the commander lay in front of her, the Pentagon, embossed in black. Next to it sat another, Dallas Presbyterian Hospital, marked with her name. 2 lives, 2 futures, both waiting for her to choose. Her fingers brushed the edge of the military seal. The paper felt heavy, like duty compressed into weight. Inside, a recall order waited, formal, final, irreversible. She didn't open it, she didn't need to. She already knew what it said. Instead, she picked up the hospital envelope. Lighter, smaller, human. The letter inside was simple. Head of Trauma Surgery. Full autonomy. We need you. Need. That word still had power. She folded the letter neatly and placed it back inside. Then she turned off the light and sat in the dark, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, a civilian heartbeat, ordinary and merciful. But her mind wasn't quiet. She saw faces again, the ones she couldn't save, the ones she did, the ones who never knew she existed. Her training had taught her to compartmentalize. Her conscience had taught her to reopen those compartments, one wound at a time. Now, for the first time, she wasn't sure which lesson had done more damage. 3 days later, a small brown envelope arrived in her mailbox. No return address, no signature. Just a single sentence written in precise, military handwriting. The world still needs people like you, H. She stared at it for a long time, then tore it open. Inside was a check, no amount listed, just the words. Seed funding, for whatever mission you choose. Her breath caught. Mission. The word echoed in her chest like an old drumbeat she'd forgotten she knew by heart. She sat there for a while, staring at the check, until the corner of an idea began to take shape, not sharp yet, not complete, but alive. That afternoon, she drove back to Patriot Firearms. The parking lot was quiet this time. No motorcycles, no chaos, just silence and sun. Inside, the store felt different, The laughter was gone, replaced by something else, respect maybe, or guilt. Bull was behind the counter, posture straight, tone careful. When he saw her, his face drained of color. "Ma'am," he stammered, I didn't think you'd come back." Elena gave him a small nod. "Relax, Crawford. I'm not here to audit your soul." He exhaled shakily, a nervous chuckle escaping despite himself. "Then what can I do for you?" She looked around the store. The same weapons gleamed behind the glass, but they didn't feel the same. The room didn't feel the same. It wasn't a temple to violence anymore, not to her. It was just a tool room, a place where potential lived, waiting for intention to decide its purpose. "I want to rent your range," she said, "and one of your classrooms." He blinked. "For what exactly?" "For training," she said, "but not the kind you're used to." He frowned. "You mean like safety courses?" "No," she said. "Like survival courses for women, for anyone who's been told they can't. I'll teach them what fear looks like, how to control it, how to move, how to think." Bull hesitated. "And you'll be the instructor?" Her gaze held his, calm, steady, inevitable. "Yes." He swallowed hard, then nodded. "You can use anything you need, free of charge." "Good," she said. "I'll need a few weeks to prepare." What do I call the class?" She paused, considering. The answer came from somewhere deep inside, a name that had followed her through every shadow, every silence, every unspoken mission. "The Ghost 7 Foundation," she said finally. Her tone was soft, but the words filled the room like prophecy. Bull frowned. "That's an interesting name." Elena smiled faintly. "It's not about fear. It's about resilience. The ghosts are the ones we carry, but they can teach us if we let them." He nodded slowly. "I'll put the word out." "Don't," she said quickly. "Not yet. Let it spread the way it always does, quietly." That night, Elena sat on her balcony with a cup of black coffee, the city lights of Dallas glittering like stars that never learned to rest. Her laptop sat open beside her. On the screen, a simple page, no logos, no names, just a title at the top in plain white letters. G7F, Practical Defense Training. And below it, a line of text she typed slowly, deliberately. Because sometimes the difference between a victim and a survivor is 10 seconds of training. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment. Then she clicked save. For the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. Not the kind she used to chase in deserts or battlefields, but the kind that comes from purpose. A new mission, built not on taking life but protecting it. As the night deepened, she whispered the words that had haunted her ever since she'd walked away from the military. "The war doesn't end when you come home. It just changes its uniform." She looked up at the sky, dark, infinite, forgiving. Then she whispered, "But maybe this time I get to choose which side I'm on." Weeks later, Patriot firearms looked different again. The shooting lanes that once echoed with mockery now carried new sounds, the slow rhythm of breathing exercises, the calm voice of instruction, the steady cadence of women learning how to fight fear instead of each other. Elena moved among them, part teacher, part ghost. Her voice was patient, but her eyes were sharp. Every command was delivered, with precision and compassion in equal measure. "Remember," she said, standing beside a young woman aiming a pistol for the first time, "you're not here to win. You're here to survive. The difference between fear and focus is how long you hold your breath." The girl nodded, breathing out slowly, steadying her hand. When the shot rang out and struck dead center, the class erupted in quiet applause. Elena just smiled, small, proud, but distant. For her, the applause wasn't for accuracy. It was for transformation. Because in that moment, she wasn't just watching someone hit a target. She was watching someone become one less victim in a world that often mistook vulnerability for weakness. And that, to her, was victory. Sometimes redemption doesn't come through confession. Sometimes it arrives quietly, wearing hospital scrubs, carrying old scars, and teaching strangers how to survive the darkness you once lived in. Alina had finally found her battlefield. And for the first time in her life, it didn't require anyone to die for her to win. How long can peace last when your hands remember the weight of war? For a while, Alina thought she'd found it peace, that quiet rhythm between the chaos. Days filled with movement and purpose, not orders. She woke before sunrise, the Texas light spilling through the blinds of her modest apartment, the coffee bitter and honest. Then she'd drive to the range, not as Ghost 7, not as a soldier, but as a teacher. The Ghost 7 Foundation had grown faster than she expected. What began as whispered lessons between friends had become something alive, something needed. The first classes had been small. 3 women, 1 retired officer, and a single mother named Claire who'd almost been killed in a carjacking 2 years before. By the 3rd week, there were 12 students. By the 6th, there were 40. By the end of the month, her waiting list stretched beyond Dallas. They came from everywhere: nurses, teachers, flight attendants, grocery clerks, veterans' wives. Some carried trauma like open wounds. Others came carrying anger, the kind that eats you if you don't feed it purpose. Alina gave them both something else: control. The shooting range echoed differently now. No laughter, no mockery, only breath, focus, precision. Fear being replaced, inch by inch, with calm. Alina stood beside each student as they learned to breathe through panic. Slow, she'd say, voice low, steady. Don't rush. You control the weapon, not the other way around. Her tone wasn't harsh like an instructor. It was deliberate, gentle, but unwavering, like someone guiding a heartbeat back into rhythm. She didn't tell them she was a soldier. She didn't have to. They saw it in the way she moved, every motion exact, efficient, unforced. In how she held her silence, not as weakness, but as gravity. Some nights she'd drive home exhausted but quietly fulfilled, her soul buzzing with something she hadn't felt in years: hope. But other nights, when the sky was dark and her apartment too quiet, she'd feel it again, that pull from the past. The whisper that peace was a fragile illusion, one she hadn't earned yet. And that ghosts don't stay buried, they circle back. One Friday evening, near closing time, Alina stayed late cleaning the range. The others had gone home. The echo of gunfire had faded hours ago. She liked the solitude, the smell of oil and metal, the hum of distant neon signs. That's when she noticed the envelope on her desk. No return address. Just one word written in neat block letters: records. Inside were 3 photographs. The first, a blurry surveillance still of a man with a scar running down his neck, standing outside a hotel in El Paso. The second, a grainy photo of a child's backpack splattered with blood. The third, a redacted government memo stamped Nightshade, classified. Her stomach turned cold. She flipped the paper over. Written on the back in a familiar hand were 6 words. You can't erase what you created. No signature, but she knew. Only one person ever wrote to her without using her name. Only one man still believed she owed a debt to the ghost she'd buried. Colonel Trent Holloway. Her old handler. Her pulse quickened. She hadn't heard that name in nearly 4 years, not since nightfall. And if he was reaching out now, it wasn't for nostalgia. The next morning, she arrived early at the range. The Texas dawn still clung to the air, cool and silent. But her mind was racing. She found Marcus already waiting for her outside, leaning against his truck with a thermos in hand. You got it too, he said before she even spoke. She froze. Got what? He held up a matching envelope, torn open. Inside, the same photos. They sent one to me, he said. No note, just these. Her breath caught. You think it's real. Could be bait. He took a sip of his coffee. Either way, they're poking the bear. Elena exhaled slowly. Why now? Because you made noise, he said. You think you can walk away clean from programs like Nightshade. The moment that video went viral, someone up the chain started digging. She looked toward the rising sun, the light cutting across her face like a line between two lives. I didn't ask for any of this. Marcus shrugged. You don't have to ask. Ghosts answer their own summons. She turned toward him. I'm not going back. I know, he said softly, but that doesn't mean they won't come looking. He reached into his pocket and handed her a flash drive. Old military contacts sent this last night. Intel chatter says someone been reactivating assets off book. Nightshade's fingerprints all over it. You're not the only ghost still breathing. Elena's eyes narrowed. Who? Codename Peregrine. He paused. Ring any bells? Her silence was answer enough. Peregrine. The name hit her like a blade slipping between old ribs. She'd known him once, not just as a teammate but as a mirror. Fast, precise, brilliant. And ruthless. He'd been Nightshade's sharpshooter before her. Until the day she replaced him. He was supposed to be dead. That night she sat at her desk, the photos spread out before her. The faces, the blood, the past clawing back through the cracks she'd sealed shut. She didn't pray, she hadn't done that in years. But she did something close. She wrote. Not a report, not a confession. Just a note to herself. If they come for me, I won't run. But I won't become them again either. Not unless I have to. She folded the paper, slipped it into her medical bag, the same one that once carried trauma kits into war zones and classified deserts. Her new battlefield, her new vow, all contained in that one bag. Days passed. Classes continued. On the surface, everything looked the same: drills, range sessions, de-escalation exercises. But Elena could feel it. Eyes watching, the faint hum of surveillance she knew too well, the way certain students lingered near exits, the car parked too long across the street. Old instincts woke up. The soldier she'd buried began to stir. She hated it. And yet part of her missed the clarity. The way threat made the world simple, binary. Alive. One evening, as she locked up the range, she found a figure waiting near the far end of the parking lot. A man in a dark suit, posture too straight, eyes too still. When he stepped forward, the light caught his face, clean-shaven, mid-40s, the kind of ordinary that hides in plain sight. But Elena recognized the rhythm of his stride instantly. Holloway. She didn't reach for her weapon. She didn't need to. He stopped 10 feet away. Still as sharp as ever, he said, his voice cool. You always did feel the air change when someone was watching. Elena crossed her arms. You sent the photos. He smiled faintly. I had to get your attention. You could have called. I did, you didn't answer. Her eyes narrowed. You're supposed to be out, retired. I'm never out, he said. Neither are you. She let out a slow breath. What do you want? He took a step closer, his voice dropping. Peregrine's alive. Her heartbeat stumbled. That's impossible. Apparently not, he said. He's freelancing now, selling skills we built. Kills contracted through intermediaries, some military, some private. But he's out there and he's using Nightshade techniques, the kind that leave fingerprints. She stared at him, silent. He studied her face. You trained under the same doctrine. You're the only one who can predict his moves. Her voice hardened. You want me to hunt him. I want you to stop him before he burns everything you built. Elena's pulse quickened. The idea of stepping back into that world, the violence, the secrecy, the endless moral gray made her stomach twist. I don't kill anymore, she said. Holloway tilted his head. You think he'll offer you that choice? The wind moved through the range fences, whistling low like breath between teeth. For a moment she didn't speak. Then she said quietly, "If I do this, it's on my terms." Holloway smiled. It always was. He tossed a small drive onto the ground between them. Coordinates, targets, patterns. He's already killed twice in state. It won't stop. He turned and walked toward a waiting car. Before he got in, he said without turning back, "You wanted peace, Ghost. Earn it." The door slammed. The engine roared away. Elena stood in the parking lot long after the sound faded. The night pressed close around her, heavy with memory. She looked down at the flash drive glinting under the moonlight, small, ordinary, lethal. When she picked it up, her reflection stared back from the metallic surface. The same eyes that had once watched men die through a scope. The same hands that now taught others how not to need guns at all. Peace had always been a fragile thing. And the past, it was patient. That night she sat at her desk again. 2 envelopes. 2 choices. 1 vow. She whispered to the darkness, "I'm not Ghost 7 anymore, but if someone threatens what I've built, what they've built, I will remind them what she was." And somewhere in a secure building thousands of miles away, a red flag blinked to life on a classified server. Ghost 7, active signal DATACTED. Because sometimes, even when you choose healing, the world still calls you to war. What do you do when the monster you're chasing looks too much like the one you used to be? The flash drive sat on her desk all night, silent, unblinking, waiting. Elena didn't open it right away. She couldn't, because she knew that once she did, there'd be no turning back. Ghosts don't knock. They just wait until you remember them. By morning, the world looked different, sharper, thinner, fragile around the edges. The coffee tasted bitter again. The sunlight felt too honest. And the air carried that old vibration, the one that told her she was being watched. She plugged the flash drive into a secure laptop she hadn't touched in years, an old government-issue Dell, stripped, offline, ghosted. The files were simple. 2 videos, 3 photos, and a single line of text. "If you want to stop him, start where it ended." Elena stared at the words. Then she clicked the first video. Grainy drone footage. A desert compound, old, half-collapsed, sun-bleached and familiar. She recognized it instantly. The ruins of Cherkov Base, the last field site of Operation Nightshade. The place where Ghost 7 was declared dead. The second video showed something worse. A man in a tactical suit, tall, lean, moving with the controlled efficiency of someone trained to be invisible. He moved through the same ruins, planting charges, eliminating guards in silence. But it was his posture, his stance, that made her freeze. She whispered his code name aloud, Peregrine. The man turned toward the camera for half a second. And though the mask covered most of his face, his eyes were unmistakable, cold, bright, and calculated. She leaned back slowly. He was alive. And he was finishing what they started. That night, Elena sat on her balcony, the city lights blurring in the humid air. She'd spent years trying to forget what that place smelled like. The sand, the smoke, the blood cooked into the soil. Now she could almost taste it again. War had a flavor you never fully washed away. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she reached a name she hadn't dialed in years. Commander Harrison. Her thumb hovered over the call button. She didn't press it, because she knew what he'd say. "Stay out of it, Ghost. Let the agencies handle it." And she also knew she wouldn't listen. So she did what soldiers always do when orders no longer fit the mission. She made her own. 3 days later, Elena closed the Ghost 7 Foundation for maintenance. Her students asked when she'd reopen. She smiled and said soon. But inside, she wasn't sure she ever would. Marcus knew something was wrong the moment she handed him the keys. "You're leaving," he said quietly. Alina nodded, "just for a few days." "Going after him." Her silence was her answer. Marcus exhaled through his nose. "You said you were done with that life." "I am," she said, "but that life isn't done with me." He stepped forward, lowering his voice. "You sure this is about him or about you?" Alina met his gaze. "Does it matter?" He didn't answer, because they both knew it did. She left before sunrise. No uniform, no insignia, just black cargo pants, a faded field jacket, and her medical bag. Her route was Old Habit, south toward El Paso, then west into New Mexico. The land stretched wide and unforgiving, each mile peeling away another layer of civilian disguise, until only the soldier underneath remained. The drive took 11 hours. By the time she reached the desert edge, the sun had turned the sand into molten gold. She parked the SUV behind a ridge and hiked the last mile on foot, her boots whispering over the ground she once called holy and hellish in the same breath. The ruins of Cherkov Base stood ahead, broken concrete, rusted wire, and shadows that didn't move with the wind. Time hadn't buried the place. It had preserved it like a scar. She moved like a ghost again, silent, scanning, every sense alive. The old training came back, unbidden. Counting steps, measuring wind, marking sound. Breathing shallow to listen for echo. Inside the main bunker, dust covered the floors like ash. Old shell casings glittered under the thin beam of her flashlight. She found the old operations room, its table still covered in burned-out monitors and a faded American flag, edges singed. And there, scrawled across one of the cracked walls, was a message written in black spray paint. "You don't get to forget." Alina exhaled slowly. It wasn't written for anyone else. Outside, a sound cut through the silence, faint, rhythmic, deliberate. Footsteps. She turned off her light. For several seconds she listened. Crunch, pause, crunch. Not animal, human. She slipped behind a pillar, hand on her pistol. The sound drew closer, then stopped. A voice, low, confident, echoed off the walls. "Still breathing, ghost." She stepped out from cover. He stood at the far end of the corridor, tall, wiry, dressed in desert fatigues. His hair was shorter now, his face harder. But his eyes, they hadn't changed. "Hello, Peregrine," she said. He smiled faintly. "I heard rumors, I didn't believe them. You were supposed to be dead." "Guess we both disappoint expectations." He tilted his head. "You shouldn't have come." "I could say the same." They circled each other slowly, the air between them charged with history, the kind only shared by people who have survived the same kind of madness. Peregrine's tone was casual, almost amused. "Still playing saint, I see, teaching civilians how to aim." "They don't need to kill," she said. "They need to live." He laughed softly. "You really think that matters? You think changing a few lives will make up for the ones we erased?" Alina's jaw tightened. "I'm not trying to erase anything, just balance it." "Balance," he said, stepping closer. "You don't balance blood, you drown in it." He drew something from his pocket, a small detonator. Her stomach dropped. "Step back," she warned. "Don't do this." He smiled, eyes gleaming. "It's already done." A deep rumble shook the ground. Somewhere outside, a blast split the air, dust cascading from the ceiling. She dove behind cover as a second explosion followed, the shockwave rattling her bones. When she looked up, Peregrine was gone. All that remained was the echo of his voice. "You can't heal what you destroy." By the time the dust settled, she was bleeding from her arm, her ears ringing. She tore a strip of fabric from her sleeve and pressed it against the wound, breathing through the pain. Her old instinct screamed to chase him. But something inside her whispered louder, "Don't." Instead, she gathered fragments of his gear, a footprint pattern, a small fiber caught on a nail, and a drone chip still warm to the touch. Intel evidence. He wanted her angry. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Not yet. That night she made camp in the ruins, the stars cold and endless overhead. She cleaned her wound, stitched it carefully, and sat against the crumbling wall that once held maps of cities she'd never see again. Her hands shook once, then steadied. For a long time she just sat there in silence, thinking of the people she'd trained: Claire, the nurse, the single mother, the quiet women who learned how to hold their fear steady instead of letting it consume them. They believed she could protect them. And now the threat wasn't theoretical anymore. The past had found her. And this time, it wasn't coming for soldiers. It was coming for civilians. She pulled out her notebook and wrote a single sentence on the first blank page. If I have to become the ghost again, it will be to protect, not destroy. The words weren't a vow. They were a warning. The next morning, before sunrise, she hiked back to her SUV. When she reached the ridge, she saw the desert stretching endlessly before her, silent, golden, empty. And then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Elena, came a familiar voice. Harrison. She exhaled slowly. You've been tracking me. You left a trail even a blind satellite could follow, he said. We picked up heat signatures at Cherkov, 2 detonations. Are you okay? I'm fine, she said. He's alive, James Peregrine, and he's not finished. Silence. Then, you're not authorized to engage. I'm not under anyone's command, she said flatly. Elena, don't try to stop me. He sighed. You think you can save him? I don't know, she whispered, but I have to try. Elena, listen to me, Harrison said, voice low, urgent. If he's out there, he's already targeting you. Don't give him what he wants. What does he want? Validation, Harrison said, to prove you're still like him. Her throat tightened. Maybe I am. He paused, then promise me one thing. What? When this is over, don't let the ghost be all that's left. The line went dead. Elena stood there for a long moment, phone pressed against her chest. The wind carried the faint echo of explosions still rolling across the desert. And she whispered to herself, like a prayer disguised as an order. I won't. Then she got into the SUV and drove east, toward home, toward danger, toward the line she swore she'd never cross again. Because some wars never end. They just wait for you to remember their name. What happens when the war you left behind comes knocking at your door? 3 days after Cherkov, the world around Elena started to bend. Small shifts, quiet changes, signs that something was coming. At first, it was little things. A light left on in her office when she was sure she'd turned it off. A van parked too long across the street. Her laptop camera, light flickering for half a second before dying again. Old instincts whispered, you're being watched. She ignored them at first. She wanted to believe she was still safe inside the life she'd built, the foundation, the students, the quiet purpose she'd fought so hard for. But peace has its own kind of blindness. You start mistaking stillness for safety. And that's when the cracks appear. The call came at 2:14 a.m. Marcus. His voice was low, tight with urgency. Elena, we've got a problem. She sat up instantly, the tone alone enough to pull her back into soldier mode. What happened? It's Claire, he said. Someone broke into her apartment. She's alive but shaken. Said a man was waiting inside when she got home. Elena's blood ran cold. Did he take anything? Just her laptop, but he left a message. What kind of message? Marcus hesitated, a single line painted on her wall. He read it aloud. She can't save you. Elena closed her eyes. The words hit like a blade turned slow. Peregrine wasn't hiding anymore. He was sending her invitations. By dawn, Elena was already in her SUV, tires humming against the asphalt as Dallas rolled by in a blur of lights and tension. She reached Claire's building just after sunrise. The local police were still there, yellow tape, flashing lights, the soft buzz of radio chatter. Claire sat on the curb, wrapped in a blanket. Her face pale, eyes wide, hands trembling. When she saw Elena, she stood too quickly, nearly falling before Elena caught her. "I didn't know where else to go," Claire whispered. "He knew my name, my address. He said you'd understand." Elena held her close. "You're safe now." But she wasn't sure she believed it. Inside the apartment, the scene was surgical. No forced entry, no chaos. Just precision. A door lock picked clean, every camera disabled. And on the living room wall, the message Marcus had read. "She can't save you." Painted in black spray, the handwriting familiar in a way that made her stomach twist. The detective on site, a tired man with coffee breath and skeptical eyes, approached her. "You her instructor?" he asked. "Yes." "Military background?" "Something like that," she said. He nodded slowly. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. No prints, no residue. They cut power to the entire block 5 minutes before she got home. Pro stuff. Elena studied the wall again. Her reflection caught faintly in the glossy paint. "He's not trying to hide," she murmured. "Who he?" the detective asked. She didn't answer. That night back at the Ghost 7 Foundation, the air felt wrong, too still, too quiet. Elena walked through the empty range, hand brushing the wall where photos of her first students hung, small snapshots of pride and progress. Now each face felt like a potential target. She pulled out her old satellite phone, the one she'd sworn never to use again, and dialed a number from memory. Harrison answered on the first ring. "I was waiting for this call." "He's here," she said, "in Dallas." "I know," Harrison said grimly. 3 killings across Texas in 48 hours, all within 20 miles of your foundation. No connection between victims except tactical precision. One-shot eliminations. He's playing a message." Elena's grip tightened on the phone. "He's hunting me." "Or what you've become," Harrison said. "He's dismantling your piece by piece." She looked around the training room, the bulletproof glass, the racks of unloaded weapons, the chalkboard still marked with the words "Control your fear." "Then I need to protect them," she said. "Elena," Harrison said carefully, "if you go after him, there's no coming back from that line." She closed her eyes. Maybe that's the point. Over the next few days, Elena locked down the foundation. She upgraded security systems, rerouted surveillance feeds, encrypted student data. She taught her classes in smaller groups now, always watching the corners of the room, always tracking every shadow. Her students sensed it too, the subtle change in her tone, the extra pauses between sentences. She was still calm but sharper. The kindness remained, but it had grown edges. One of her students, a young paramedic named Leah, approached her after class. "You okay, Miss Vasquez?" she asked. "You seem somewhere else lately." Elena forced a small smile. "I'm fine, just tired." Leah hesitated. "I heard what happened to Claire." Elena's expression didn't change. "Claire's safe, that's what matters." "But if someone's targeting us?" "No one's targeting you," Elena said too quickly. Leah frowned. "Then who?" Elena looked at her, this bright, brave girl who still believed in simple good and evil. "Go home, Leah," she said softly. "Stay alert, and trust no one who doesn't bleed when you hit them." Leah blinked, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means," Elena said quietly, "monsters don't always look like monsters." That night, Alina reviewed the footage from the Foundation's security feeds. At 11:42 p.m. she saw it a flicker. One of the external cameras caught a figure standing across the street under a street lamp. Still watching. For 7 minutes he didn't move. Then, without warning, he lifted his hand. And in his palm, reflecting the faint orange glow of the light, was a single silver coin. Her breath caught. The Ghost Unit token. Nightshade issue. Each operative had one. She'd thrown hers into the ocean years ago. Peregrine was showing her his. A reminder. A challenge. A countdown. At 2 a.m., Alina loaded her pistol for the first time in years. Each round clicked into the magazine like a memory resurfacing. Her reflection in the mirror didn't look like a teacher anymore. It looked like a ghost coming back from exile. She whispered to herself, "Don't become what he wants you to be." But the whisper sounded hollow. The next day, Marcus found her at the range, staring down a row of empty targets. She'd been there for hours. No ear protection, no gear, just silence. "You shouldn't do this alone," he said. "I can't risk anyone else," she said. "Then at least don't do it as her," Marcus said. "Don't become Ghost 7 again." She looked down at her hands, gloved now, steady. Maybe Ghost 7's the only one who can stop him. Marcus stepped closer. "You told me once redemption means building something. Don't burn it now." She turned to him. "He's already burning it." A pause. Then Marcus said quietly, "Then at least make sure you're not standing in the fire." That evening, she got another message. No sender. Just a 6-second video clip. The camera panned across a shooting range, her range, and stopped on a paper target. Someone had drawn a crude figure in marker, her silhouette. 15 holes through the chest. 1 through the head. Then the camera zoomed in on a single word written beneath it in red ink. "Choose." Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Coordinates. Somewhere outside Fort Worth. She stared at them for a long moment. Then she whispered, "So this is how it ends." By the time she arrived, the sun had already dipped below the horizon. The coordinates led her to an abandoned rail yard. Rusted tracks, derelict containers, wind whistling through the metal bones of forgotten industry. She parked the SUV in the shadows, slipped out, moved low. Every instinct alive again, every sense tuned sharp. The faint hum of a drone buzzed overhead. And then in the distance, a voice echoed through a speaker. "Hello, Ghost." She froze. Peregrine's voice, calm, taunting, theatrical. "You built something beautiful," he said. "I almost envy you, but you know how this works. Creation demands destruction." Her pulse quickened. She scanned for movement. Nothing. "You could have stayed hidden," he said. "But you wanted to matter again. You needed it." Alina clenched her jaw. "You don't know me anymore." "I know exactly who you are," his voice replied. "You're still me, you just learned how to smile while bleeding." The speaker went silent. And then a click. A red light flared to life on a nearby container. A sniper's laser. She dove behind cover just as the first round split the air, a metallic scream ricocheting off the walls. Dust and debris exploded around her. She rolled, drew her pistol, scanned the rooftops. Nothing but echo and night. Another shot. Closer. She waited, one heartbeat, two, then fired back, not to hit but to mark distance. The round sparked against a metal beam 50 yards out. She'd found him. When the silence fell again, she whispered into the darkness. "You're not the only one who remembers how to hunt. How do you end a war when the enemy wears your own face?" The rail yard was silent now, except for the wind scraping against the corrugated metal. Dust curled around her boots. The smell of gun oil, Rust and rain-soaked dirt clung to the air like an old scar that never healed. Alina moved slowly between the freight containers, every step deliberate, every breath counted. Somewhere out there, the man who knew her better than anyone was watching. The man she'd trained beside. The man she'd buried. The man who'd come back to erase everything she'd built. She whispered to herself, half command, half prayer. Stay calm, control your fear. It was what she taught her students. Tonight she was the student. A flicker of movement, a shadow against the far wall. She pivoted, weapon up, but it was only a hanging chain swaying in the wind. Then a voice, close now, almost behind her. You taught them well, but you forgot how to listen. She turned sharply, caught the glint of steel, and dove aside just as a knife hissed through the air, clipping her shoulder. She rolled, came up crouched, pistol drawn. Peregrine stepped into the open. No mask this time. Just a face carved from stone and regret. He looked older, leaner, eyes hollow. A ghost wearing human skin. Still faster than the rest, he said, wiping the blood from his blade, but slower than you used to be. Age does that, she said quietly. He smirked, or conscience. They circled each other, two predators orbiting an old wound. You don't have to do this, she said. You already lost once, walk away. Walk away, he repeated, almost laughing. You walked away. You left me to rot in a hole while they wrote your name on medals. I was the one who made you what you are. You made me efficient, she said. I made myself human again. He tilted his head. Humanity's weakness I tried it once, didn't take. He moved fast, precise. She fired 1-2 controlled bursts. He ducked behind cover, bullets sparking off steel. Silence, then his voice again. You really think you can build something pure out of what we did, out of blood and lies? I have to try. Then you're still lying to yourself. A blast of thunder rolled over the yard. The storm that had been gathering finally broke, rain slicing through the night. The metal ground turned slick, every reflection fractured into ghosts of light. They moved through it like two memories colliding. She fired again, grazing his arm. He vanished between containers, his voice echoing through the rain. Tell me, Ghost, when you train them, do you tell them who you really are? They don't need to know. Oh, they need to. They should know their savior is a killer who couldn't save herself. Enough, she snapped. Hit a nerve. His silhouette appeared atop a container, rifle in hand. You think redemption erases sin, but it doesn't. It just gives it better aim. She steadied her breath. Maybe, but at least mine aims to protect. She fired. The round struck the edge of the container. He dropped down, fast, controlled, landing just a few yards from her. They met halfway. A blare of motion. Her pistol knocked aside. His knife slashed, shallow cut across her forearm. Her elbow drove into his ribs. The sound a sharp crack. He staggered, smiled through the pain. Still symmetrical, he breathed. Every strike, every counter, we were designed to match. Then let's see which one learned something new. He lunged again. She sidestepped, used his momentum, drove him into the wall. The knife clattered away. For a second she had him, gun pressed under his jaw. But she didn't pull the trigger. His voice was almost a whisper. Do it, end it, that's what you're made for. Her hand trembled. Rain poured down her face, mixing with blood and sweat. I'm not that person anymore, she said. Then you'll die as something worse, half awake. He grabbed her wrist, twisting, slamming her hand against the wall. The gun fell. They struggled, raw, close, desperate. No tactics now, just survival. Finally, she caught his arm, flipped him hard onto the wet concrete. He gasped, coughing blood, the fight draining from his body. She stood over him, weapon recovered, breathing hard. This isn't war anymore, she said. It's a choice. He laughed weakly. You think mercy makes you clean? No, she said. It just means I remember what dirt feels like. He looked up at her, eyes suddenly human. Something in them cracked. Maybe the part that still remembered when they were more than tools. I wanted peace too, he whispered. I just didn't know how to live in it. Elena's throat tightened. You could have learned. I tried, he said, rain running into his eyes. But ghosts don't heal, they haunt. He reached into his vest, pulling something out, a detonator blinking red. Her pulse spiked. Wait, she started. But his thumb hovered over the switch. This ends where it started, he said. She fired. One round. Straight through his hand. The detonator skidded across the ground, sparks hissing out in the rain. He screamed, clutching his shattered fingers. Don't make me kill you, she said, voice breaking. Don't make me be her again. He looked up, face twisted in pain and something close to admiration. You already are. Then his head dropped back against the concrete, breath slowing, eyes staring through her into some far-off place only soldiers see when the fight over. She checked his pulse, faint but there. She holstered her weapon. Not tonight, she whispered. By the time the police arrived, she was gone. Only the rain remained. And Peregrine, alive restrained, the detonator inert beside him. No one knew her name. No one saw her leave. Hours later, the city slept. Elena stood on the rooftop of the foundation, drenched, still shaking. Below her, the lights of Dallas pulsed like veins. Somewhere down there, her students were dreaming of ordinary mornings. Of safety she'd fought to build. Marcus found her just before dawn. He didn't speak at first, just stood beside her, watching the sky turn from black to gray. You stopped him, he said finally. She nodded, for now. You didn't kill him. No. That's something. She looked at her hands, still trembling. It doesn't feel like it. Marcus sighed. Maybe that's how you know it mattered. He handed her a folded piece of paper. Commander Harrison sent this. She opened it. A single sentence, typed on official letterhead. File closed. Ghost 7 terminated status, non-lethal. And beneath it, a handwritten note. You did what the rest of us couldn't. You chose to live. J.H. She folded the paper quietly. The sun broke through the clouds, pale and gold, painting the wet streets below in light. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like a ghost. Just someone standing in the aftermath, breathing. Weeks passed. The foundation reopened. Classes resumed. The range filled again with steady breathing, slow trigger pulls, quiet confidence. Claire returned first, her hands still trembling but her aim true. Then Leah, then others. Elena moved among them, voice calm, posture relaxed. Not the soldier, not the saint. Something in between. One day Claire asked, Miss Vasquez, are you ever afraid? Elena smiled faintly, every day. But you don't show it. I do, she said softly, just not with my hands. That evening, as the last student left, Elena walked to the firing line alone. She loaded a single round, raised the pistol, and aimed at a blank paper target. For a long time she didn't shoot. She just breathed. Steady, controlled, present. Then slowly she lowered the weapon. Some battles aren't meant to end with a trigger pull. Some are meant to fade quietly, leaving behind only the lesson. She set the pistol down and whispered, You can't heal what you refuse to touch. The words weren't for Peregrine. They were for herself. Later, as she locked the door and stepped into the evening air, she saw a small envelope taped to the glass. No name. No seal. Just a coin inside, a ghost unit token, weathered and dull. Her token. She turned it over in her palm. On the back, scratched into the metal, was a single word. Free. Her breath caught, and for the first time in a long, long while, she smiled, small, tired, real. Because sometimes redemption doesn't roar. It whispers. It walks quietly through rain-soaked nights, bleeding but alive. It trains others to stand, so it never has to pick up the rifle again. And when the world tests it, when the ghosts come back, it remembers. Strength isn't in the shot you take. It's in the one you don't. Because dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It simply acts.